This is Mary. Welcome to the IHC Craft Room. The weather is getting colder here in Canada, and that tells me that Christmas is right around the corner. So it's time to start making some glitter ornaments for my tree. This is the one we're going to be making today together, so get your materials ready and let's get crafty. We definitely need to start with the ornaments, and I got lucky and found these at the Dollar Tree this year, but in the past I've gotten them at Michael's and Amazon, so have a look around. I'm sure you'll find them somewhere. Next is the glitter. I got mine at the dollar store. I went with silver and pink, but you can pick any color glitter that you like. I'm going to go with blue, black, and white multi-surface paint for my design. The important thing here is that it's multi-surface. We need it to be able to adhere to the plastic surface, so that's super important. And last but not least is the Minwax Polycrylic. I go with the clear gloss because I want to have that glitter really shining through. Please note this is ultra fast drying, so you're going to have to work fast with it. And you can pick this up at a local home improvement store. I got mine at Home Depot. In terms of tools, we're going to start with parchment paper, some scrap paper, and paper towels. And we're going to need some plastic cups. I have small and large, but one size will do. A funnel for the glitter, a condiment bottle for the polycrylic. This is going to be really useful getting that polycrylic into the ornament. Paint palette, some rubbing alcohol, clothespins, some Q-tips followed by some toothpicks, always toothpicks. And of course, our dotting tools are needed, some pliers, a pair of rubber gloves, some painter's tape, and my glue gun, as always, ready to burn me. Let's start by taking the caps off of the ornaments and setting those aside for later, and then getting our clothespins set up, and you'll see what they're for. Next, we're going to squirt the polycrylic inside the interior of the ornament and get started turning the ornament over and over again to get the polycrylic all over the interior. You'll notice that it is coming out opaque from the bottle. That's okay. It is going to dry completely clear. But the fact that it's opaque makes this part a lot simpler. It makes it easier to see that you're covering the full entirety of the ornament. It's very important that you do that. So take your time here. This step is important. And here we use the clothespins to keep our ornament upright. I can't tell you how many different ways I tried to make this happen, cutting the cups, doing a million different things. And in the end, clothespins for the win. So we're going to do the exact same thing on this other ornament and make sure that when you leave it upside down, you let it drain for a limited amount of time. This does dry quickly. So all you really want to make sure is that you're eliminating drips, but not letting it dry completely. That's very important. So keep an eye on these as they're drying. It's been about 5 to 7 minutes and we're ready to start adding the glitter in. So I'm going to fold these scrap pieces of paper and use them to catch the glitter and pour it back into the glitter containers when we're done. Next, we're going to flip over the ornaments, put them right side up and seat them in the clothespin chair we created. Using the funnel, I'm going to add glitter into the ornament. And I'm going to slow this down to show you how just rotating the ornament over and over again is going to give you some beautiful coverage. Make sure that you're catching everything. Once again, you want to make sure you don't miss even one tiny spot. And we're going to get into that neck of the ornament by using a damp paper towel to cap the ornament and give it a few good shakes. Shake, 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 shake. And then take it off and flip it upside down and tap that glitter out of there. Make sure you get all the excess out. We don't want a lot of glitter rolling around inside. And then I'm going to leave it to drain upside down for 24 hours just to let the inside really dry well before I put the cap on. So let's do that again for the silver ornament. Our glitter ornaments are done. Next, it's time to get the ornament ready to receive the paint. We're going to do that by wiping it down with some rubbing alcohol, letting it dry off, and then I'm going to eyeball where the center of the ornament is and place a very tiny center dot to guide me for my center mandala dot. Usually I would be using a guideline stencil, but since I can't draw onto the plastic surface, we're going to just use a guideline dot like this. Now, take a deep breath, let it out, and place your first center dot. Isn't she a beauty? Now this paint is giving me a little bit of a peak, so I'm going to smooth that out with a dotting tool just so that when I lay a dot on top of this one, it won't cause any unnecessary lumps and bumps. Using the blue rod tool, we're going to start our first row. Let's take a deep breath, let it out, and place our first dot. Now we're going to leave a little gap in between the first and second and do the exact same thing with the next dot in the row. Taking a deep breath in between each dot being placed, letting it out, focusing on what you're doing in front of you, and really nothing else. This is the beauty of mandala dotting. Deep breaths in and out, placing one dot after the other, letting the row develop in front of you. For our second row, we're going to be using the rod tool in size 3.0. This will give us a bigger dot than the row ahead of it. And we're going to be placing it in a cross pattern. This is because we are not using a stencil, and it's hard to keep things balanced without using this type of method where you can give yourself a little bit of a middle dot as opposed to trying to space things out evenly one at a time. In between those dots, we'll be laying down another smaller dot to provide a sweet little pattern. That's going to be using the white Stylus 2.5 rod and, of course, our white paint. For the third row, we'll be using a white rod in size 6.0 with the black paint, starting off with a cross pattern again to create balance across the third row. This paint is not performing well for me. I'll explain a little bit more about it later, but first, let's go back to that first dot I laid down. I wasn't happy with it, so I'm going to lay another dot on top of it so that it's roughly the same size as its three amigos. Next, we're going to use the pink rod stylus in size 2.0 to add a top dot and then flip it over and use the smaller side of the same stylus rod to walk the dots down. I'm going to do the same thing on every one of these dots and show you how walking the dot is so fun and so simple to do. Dot, 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 dot. The next round of walking the dots is going to be using the green stylus rod with 3.0 millimeter side. That's the bigger side we're going to use for the big dot, and then flip it over again and use the smaller side to walk your dots. And here we come across the issue with the paint. The problem is that this paint is too runny and it will not stay still. And it ran into my row of walking the dots and really just destroyed that whole section for me. So I'm using Q-tips and toothpicks to wipe it off and start afresh. There's really not much you can do about it when something like that happens. So the lesson to learn here is to be patient and pay attention to all of your dots and make sure that they dry well. In this case, I was so focused on moving forward to the next dot that I didn't notice that so many of these were warping and morphing and destroying the rows in front of them. So you're going to see a lot of correction happening here until I finally get to the point where I realize this paint is just more trouble than it's worth. And the only way I can resolve it, because again, I'm still a beginner too. I'm still learning how to fix all these little problems as I go. The only thing I could think was to just place my dot and blow on it and let it dry a little bit before I start working on the next row. I'm sure there's a lot of additives or things I could do to the paint to make it work better, but I just didn't have the time, patience, or resources to do it at that moment. So here we are. Things have dried, and now I'm walking my dots again. So let's get back to it. Haha, just kidding. Let's make one more mistake. Yep, there it is. Okay, clean it off. Take another deep breath, center yourself, and let's start with the big dot right on top. Flip over your stylus rod and then walk the dots. Okay, it looks like we might be out of the woods here. Let's try again. One more row. Good dot. Let's walk the dots. Okay, yes, we did it. So let's finish off this row of second walk the dots before we move on to the next item. The next thing we're going to do is add a blue dot on the opposite side of these walked dots. And we're going to do a swiping motion to bring it down to the center with a little tail. I'm going to slow this one down to show you in real time how long it takes to actually lay down the first dot, then fill your stylus with paint and slowly but surely drag that paint down into the swiping motion. So you'll see that I already came to that dot with a little bit of paint on my stylus, and I'm slowly dragging that paint down and curving it around, bringing it to make sure that it still retains that small tip. That's the key, because if you keep pulling too much paint at the same time, you'll end up with a fat bottom, which you do not want here. You want a really thinned out bottom that tapers out to a point. So I'm going to drop another dot here and do that one more time. Take a really small stylus and pull that paint down to a tapered finish. And do the same thing here. Drop a nice dot and then take your thinner stylus and drag it down to a tapered finish. You're just going to keep repeating this process. And trust me, the more you do this, the better you're going to become at it. Like every other skill when it comes to dot painting, repetition and practice is the key to success. For the second part of our pattern, we're going to be using white paint and the 6.0 white rod tool to make a big, beautiful white dot there in between the petals of our first part of the pattern. You notice that I continue to keep smoothing out my paint and popping bubbles. It's important to do this when your paint is wet because it will pop or be noticeable when the paint has dried. Next, we're going to start the next row of walking the dots. Using the 2mm pink stylus rod tool, we'll make our first big dots and then flip it over and use the other side to walk the dots across and around our existing dots. Using the 3mm green stylus rod tool, I'll make the big dot first and then flip the stylus over and use the smaller end to walk the dots once again. It's time to start working on the blue swipes again. So we're going to be using the 2.5mm white ball stylus to create the initial dot. And then I'm using the smallest possible stylus I have to fill it up with a little bit of paint and then take that dot and drag it down to a point. Again, you want that tapered point at the end, and take your time about this. You're watching it very sped up, but the actual process of pulling it down is going to take some time. So practice, be patient, and be kind to yourself. This is going to take some time to learn. For the next part of our design, we're going to mix blue and white together to get a light blue, and we're going to be using a term or a technique that I like to call the one scoop ice cream cone. I don't have a sweet tooth. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, so the way this works is I'm going to be using a 4.25 white rod, and I'm going to dip it into the blue paint and then use my variety of different styluses to draw it down to a point. The difference between this and a swipe is that you'll notice that it's making that really yummy looking, I don't know, ice cream cone shape. That's what it looks like to me. So that's the kind of look that we're going for this row. So get your ice cream scoop on, kids. Next, we're going to outline the cone in black to really make it pop and stand out. I'm going to use 3 different sizes of stylus in order to do that. And the first is the 1mm blue stylus. That's going to be the center dot at the very top of the ice cream cone. Then I'll be using the 0.8mm yellow stylus to walk the dots all the way down into the tiniest dots you ever did see. And at the very, very bottom of the ice cream cone, we'll be using the 3mm green stylus to add one final black dot just to kind of put a little cherry, I guess, on the bottom. Well, that analogy didn't work out very well, did it? Anywho, let's keep outlining. Just above the row where we walk the dots in black, we're going to be using our 8.0 white rod tool to put a big blue dot right in the center. We'll add a smaller blue dot by using the 5.0 white rod tool in the sections remaining. Let's add some top dots to our design using the 8.0 white rod tool and light blue paint. Using the 3mm green stylus tool and light blue paint, we're going to add some top dots by flipping between both sides of the stylus tool to get the right size for each dot. Now that our paint is dry, we're going to put the cap back on, and we're going to do that by bending these little rods inward, or you can cut them off if you prefer, and then holding it using the pliers and adding some hot glue. Now, the reason I bent them inside is because we don't want them scraping the sides of the ornament and accidentally taking some of that glitter off. And there you go. The cap is on and our ornament is complete. Isn't she a beauty? Look at her sparkle. Thank you for joining me in making our first glitter ornament together. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Share your thoughts in the comments and remember to subscribe for more fun projects as we continue to get crafty together. Toodaloo!